people forget that back in 1996, when Bill Clinton signed welfare reform, passed by a Republican-controlled Congress, both houses were controlled by the Republicans then, in 1995 and 96. Do you remember that he had actually vetoed 2 welfare reform bills before that? The Republicans in the House and Senate back in 95, 96 had sent Bill Clinton welfare reform bills, and he had vetoed them, even though Bill Clinton had campaigned in 92 on welfare reform, because he thought they were too extreme. So the Republicans scaled back the bill, compromised with the White House, and they sent him a 3rd bill, and he signed it. So that could be a recipe for success next year and in 2016. I can see that happening. I predict it will happen on a lot of issues.
Do you foresee significant turnover in the Snyder administration, and if so, how will that affect the government?
You've already seen some departures. Bill Rustum, who is one of his top kind of House intellectuals, working on what George H.W. Bush used to call the vision thing. He is retired. You've had other people like Andy Dillon, who's the state treasurer, already leave. You know, I think there are going to be a trickle of people leaving, but I think probably the hardcore of most of the people around the governor are going to stay. There's going to be some turnover at the Health and Human Services Department, with Maura Corrigan leaving. But, you know, I think it's going to be, by and large, the same group of people, or it's going to be pretty quiet departure. I don't think you're going to see any dramatic changes that are going to provoke newspaper headlines. It's all going to be done very quietly and efficiently, kind of like a CPA would do it, right, Rod? Yeah, yeah. Relentless positive action.
Do Democrats tend to vote straight ticket more than Republicans, and would that account for the education sweep this election?
Yeah, there is so much speculation about this, and you know, there are ways to look at actually who voted, but it's going to take weeks or months to figure it all out. I suspect that idea that Democrats swept these education board races with the exception of one, the way they did was probably because of straight ticket voting. You know the old mantra, right? Make it emphatic, vote straight Democratic. And that's been around since the 1930s with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You may remember that about 15 years ago, the Republicans, with John Engler as governor and in control of the House and Senate, actually passed a law to get rid of straight ticket voting. Well, a Republican legislature does not vote to get rid of straight ticket voting if they think it's going to hurt them, right? So obviously Republicans believed and had documented evidence 15 years ago, and I think that still exists, that Democrats are the party most likely to vote straight party ticket. So the Republicans said, okay, let's get rid of that and force all voters to go in and make choices race by race all the way down the ballot. You can't vote straight party anymore, okay? Remember, when you vote straight party, you can, after you pull the straight party or connect the dots or whatever at the top of the ticket, you can go back on individual races and vote for somebody on the other side. Like you could vote straight Democratic and you could go down and say, okay, I'm going to vote to re-elect Rick Snyder, Republican, but other than that, I'm not going to touch the ballot. That means every other race, Gary Peters, Congress, State Senate, State House, State Education Boards, they're all going to be Democratic votes for that particular voter. So, you know, I think when the Republicans passed that law, they thought, well, that'll solve our problem. What did the Democrats do? They mounted a petition drive to put it on the ballot. Remember, we had a statewide referendum. I think it was in 2000, the year 2000, on do you want to get rid of straight ticket voting. People voted absolutely no. We do not want to get rid of straight ticket voting. We want to keep it. And so I think probably that was a big factor this year. I think a lot of people, more people voted straight ticket Democratic than did straight ticket Republican. And the Democrats who voted that way, enough of them, remember, a lot of these races are decided on the margin. 3 to 5% of the vote on a scale of 0 to 100 makes a difference between victory and defeat. If you can just get 3 to 5% of all the Democrats who vote straight party to cross over and vote for Rick Snyder for governor, or for Pat Somerville from New Boston for state house, or for some other Republican for state senate, that person can win, that Republican can win, even while most of these other races are going to go Democratic.
And our final question, and something you've never considered before, of course, do you believe Rick Snyder is a viable presidential candidate in 2016, and might he be too moderate to win the Republican Party nomination?
Well, there are two questions there. The short answers are no and yes. I mean, I do not think he is a viable candidate to run for president. I don't think, frankly, he's interested in undertaking a campaign for president. I know his wife is not interested in his running for president, but we've heard that before. Somehow these wives always cave in and say, okay, go ahead, you know, whatever. But in this case, I think maybe the wife is right. And secondly, he's probably a little too moderate. But the most important thing about Rick Snyder is temperamentally, the idea that he would be willing to undertake what you have to go through to win a Republican nomination for the presidency. Can you imagine? Look, he had a terrible time just running for re-election this year. It was the worst campaign by an incumbent Republican governor, or incumbent governor, period, I've ever seen in half a century. It was the worst. I mean, he hated it. He actually apologized to his own staff for being such a terrible candidate after it was over. And, you know, he won by 4%, but he should have won by 10 or 12%. Plainly, he had done enough in 4 years, even though I know it angered some partisans, obviously. But he had done enough to merit re-election, and I think the people of Michigan were more than willing to re-elect him. But he almost frittered it away with a completely garbled, inept, mangled campaign. And he hung on by 4%, but that's it. So the idea that that could be a blueprint for a presidential run, forget it.
Good vice president. With that, we'd like to thank Bill Ballenger. And thanks not only to him, but also to our sponsors who make this event possible. And with that, we'll conclude. If you please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming, and have a great day.